Abu Dahab. She's a professor of international law at Georgetown University and also a non-resident fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Good to have you back with us. As I was saying, looking at those live pictures, we'll perhaps try and bring them up in a moment. Does it look to you like Israel is trying to intensify and make advances as much as it can in the final hours before this truce kicks in? Is that what's going on here?
Yes, I mean, it's a classic move, right? On the eve of a potential ceasefire, is to attack as much as possible, wreak as much destruction as possible. We saw Palestinian children who were killed by Israeli strikes earlier today as well. I think that, you know, the strategy here, if we can call it that, is because Israel has been unable for many decades to break the will of Palestinians to resist its occupation, they're trying to kill Palestinian bodies as much as they can. And it's also to instill fear and to try and sort of weaken any sort of potential resistance that could emerge after this current war.
What is the game plan for where this goes? We understand there's a truce, but it's only going to be a few days. The Israeli Prime Minister said he's going to resume the war and continue to try and destroy Hamas. Where does that go to ultimately? I mean, it's dragged on for how many days and weeks now?
It's dragged on for
any sign of the Israelis coming anywhere close to achieving their military objectives, other than killing a lot of Palestinian civilians? Obviously, that has happened.
Yes, well, I mean, we have seen intensive talks happening, or sort of mediation happening by the Qataris and the Egyptians and the Americans, just to bring this 4-day ceasefire into fruition. And I think we'll just continue to see more of those intensive efforts to extend and renew the current ceasefire. I think that, you know, the role of the United States is particularly important here as Israel's most powerful ally. And the pressure needs to continue on the United States government to push Israel to stop the bombing, to put a definitive end to the war so that they can then come to a political solution to the current crisis. I think that there have been efforts, domestic efforts in the United States by lawyers sort of to call the government out on its complicity in aiding and abetting Israel's war on Gaza through military aid, through political support. And so those are very important efforts as well to apply pressure on the Biden administration.
And where do you think ultimately the global situation is evolving outside, of course, of the US? We've seen delegations from Arab and Muslim countries going to China.
Yes, well, as we have been seeing today, the conflict is sort of becoming a bit more regional in the sense that, of course, there's the northern front and southern Lebanon, the Houthis' actions with the Israeli-owned ship. And so this sort of, there's very real concerns that the war on Gaza is going to expand more and more into the broader region. And so I think that globally there will be efforts, whether by China or other actors, to try and sort of contain the situation and ultimately and ideally bring a permanent ceasefire.
But does anybody have that? Is it really ultimately down to the US now?
I think so. I think that the United States is Israel's most powerful ally. And so long as the United States has been supporting Israel in its political statements, in its military aid, then there's no reason really for Israel to stop what it's
Does the
doing.
US really want to see these military operations continue? Is that your reading of the Biden administration?
I mean, I think that it depends on how the pressure, the domestic political pressure on the Biden administration pans out in the next little while. I think that the whole counterterrorism narrative is what's keeping the United States sort of, on the same page as Israel in the way that it's been managing this war. But again, I think that that could and should change as long as the political pressure is gaining momentum in the United States. I mean, I think that the polls have shown that Biden's support for Biden and his foreign policy especially is declining in the United States.
All right, Noha, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts and analysis on this.